Okay, so I'm going to ask some individual questions to you folks. So this one is going to go to you, Hakeem.
Okay.
So even did some of the challenges accessing full-time employment lead you to entrepreneurship? And then what are some of the services, resources, and strategies you use to build yourself as an entrepreneur?
So, during the pandemic, I think many of us, I don't know, I speak for myself, but I think many of us had lost our jobs, I guess, in that time period. And I had just finished my business degree, and all the opportunities that were there at that time were no longer there. And I decided that I wanted to be a motivational speaker and decided that, I needed something to keep me going. I was laid off from my job as a dishwasher that I've been primarily been doing for about several years, and I had no choice in the matter. So I shifted my focus. I always shift my focus when I reach, a point in life where things don't seem to be going well. So I focus on that, and my drive and motivation to become a motivational speaker was to acknowledge my own trials and tribulations as a person living with psychosis, a person living with schizophrenia. Spent a lot of time learning as much and getting as educated as much about schizophrenia, my own illness, and reflecting back on like the times in life where it had impacted me and how it impacted others. And some of the strategies that I use was I don't really know necessarily, but I reached out to multiple organizations. Make a Change Canada was one of them. So I reached out to Make a Change Canada, and then I had a friend here, my web designer. He is a Black entrepreneur himself, and he helped design my website for a very affordable price at the time, things of that nature. And he essentially connected me with another brother from Saskatchewan. He have a business in Saskatchewan, and we decided that he wanted to do a clothing brand where it speaks about mental health, and I wanted to speak. So it kind of went from there. And as an entrepreneur, I wouldn't say that I thrive as an entrepreneur. I'm still learning. It's been a learning process for me, and I just finished my business degree, and then I've had like 2.5 years right now of advocacy work for not only Muslims but for all people, including Black people, I guess. So uh, I think I'll just leave it there. But like I reflect a lot, and I'm going to rely on my slides later, which I didn't have much to prepare for, and it's going to open up more about why I do what I do.
Of course, of course. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I love those strategies that you used and the fact that you were making mention with having issues of losing your job and then switching it up and just being like, okay, let me do this. Let me do this. Let me make up my own business. And definitely it sounds like something you're very, very passionate about. And I have to talk to you after because I want to rock some of those clothes that you're making. So that's amazing, my friend. Okay, so we are going to go on to LA. So, for your question, throughout your career, you have supported Black and Indigenous people with disabilities. While managing and building your own career, please share some tips and resources you have used and other supports that can help Black people with disabilities succeed in their career.
For the question. Man, I haven't been at work in about 4 years now, going on five. So trying to remember what I did. I did support Black students and Indigenous students. And I used to do this thing called looking white people in the eye with the students, where I wanted them to develop a sense of entitlement to feel as though they could ask for what they needed. I encouraged them to utilize the resources at the university that so many of the other students were able to access, feeling because they felt entitled to do so. I think I really worked from a perspective of self-empowerment, that seems to be a big thing for me because I am so dependent that I have to be responsible for certain things. And I think it's the idea of the circle of control versus the circle of influence. I think that's in the seven habits of highly effective people. And there's certain things in our life, and those of us with disabilities recognize it very clearly that we cannot um, control a lot of the circumstances that we find ourselves in, but we can influence it by the people that you have around you, utilizing the resources that are there for you, um, but that leap that I'm talking about is not, it's not just something that's innate and that you just normally just go towards and feel like you can claim that for yourself. So having somebody in your life that can reinforce your right to certain resources is really, really important to how I survived. Um, and asking lots of questions. And now we have, lots of technology that, like Otter, for example, I wrote 3 books using Otter. I would speak into my books, into the Otter app, and then have it transcribed, and then work with an editor to bring out the thoughts that I was having. And now with even like all of these, like I think it's called Chat GPT and things like that, there's a lot more available to help us be productive in our jobs that will put us on par in a sense with people that can work at a faster rate than we can. And those things are great things for technology, but many of our people in our community are afraid of using those things. So I'm happy to do workshops for people who want to understand how to maximize it. I'll come in and to Ashe, and I'm happy to do that. But that I'm a resourceful person, and I guess I empower people to become resourceful as well. And I'm not afraid. And I think fear is something that holds people back. I'm not afraid to fail, and we shouldn't be afraid to fail because when we fail, we recognize where we went wrong. And trust me, if you fail hard, you're not going to do that again. So, and being kind to yourself and giving yourself a break. And for those who judge, which they do, those who don't support, which they don't, a lot of people, they're not for you. And that seems easier said than done, as again, because we are social beings and we can see what life looks like in terms of feeling and emotion, and visually as well, what the thing is that you want to have, and the things that we go for in our lives to make our lives feel like we have a better quality of life. But quality of life comes from within. And so when you're on the job and you are struggling with the things that you need to do, we need to feel a sense of entitlement to ask for the help that we need. Document it. People used to get upset because I would always like CC a manager or somebody else with a higher position on my emails so that they can't respond back to me letting me know, oh, some people will take advantage of that. But you have to help people understand that there's an accountability and a responsibility to take care of their employees, and you have every right to protect yourself and to speak to an HR person and have things documented, and go after it. I hope I answered. If I didn't, I'm happy to restructure what it is you need from what I'm saying. But yeah, it
You,
was a self piece.
of course, of course, you answered that wonderfully, wonderfully, and I really feel that I could resonate with the technology and learning that technology as well, and definitely different aspects of your experience. So thank you for sharing, LA.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Not a problem. So, next question, and this is for everybody. So we'll go around the table, and everybody can get an opportunity to answer this question. Okay, so looking ahead, what key changes does employers need to implement to improve the employment landscape for Black and disabled employees?
Well, as someone that's worked in both the public sector and the private sector, um, I actually want to speak to a recent job I had been the I've been fired from a job for the first time in 15 years. Um, I think in the public sector, where I got my job offer as an IT assistant for the Ministry of Finance, there was a lot of supports there, a lot of systems in place, a lot of, because they've built it up over time, they're still improving the existing system. There will always be missteps. So I kind of basing it off experience both from the private sector and the public sector. in the public sector, it was a work able internship, and they ask you, like you don't have to disclose your diagnosis. You speak to my supervisor, let her know what accommodations I need. Like, for example, I take Seroquel, medication that makes me sleepy and groggy, as someone that wants to be motivated. So what accommodations that they can put in place for a person. Uh, but in the private sector, I find that even regardless if it's a global brand or if it's a brand that's doing really well, or if it's a company that's just barely surviving or getting by or have very few employees, they lack the systems in place to provide accommodations or the understanding. So I believe if there's a hub to educate employers what supports they can put in place for people with black and disabilities, to make it easier to transition and train them to perform their duties well. And in the public sector, there is some deficiencies there too, and discrimination, but there's a lot more protocols in place to address that. So in terms of making a complaint to HR and things of that nature. So I believe especially in the private sector, and say you're black and disabled, and they don't even provide the necessary steps to ensure that you be able to perform your job, and that they they help contribute to that, is key.
Wonderful answer. Wonderful answer. And thanks for shedding that light on how these employees or employers can work alongside their employees, because sometimes we don't think about that, right? And we don't think of that impact that it may have on individuals and having that intersectionality of blackness and disability. So thank you for sharing your experience. Very, very appreciated. And LA Wade, I'm going to pass it to you. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Of course. Okay, so looking ahead, what key changes does employers need to implement to improve the employment landscape for Black and disabled employees?
Um, I think that that's it's so funny that we live in a society where we have to ask these kind of questions, because it's like we know what we know, but we still need, I guess they need it formalized or whatever. There needs to be some awareness from the employer around what are the needs of people of African Caribbean, Black descent. There needs to be an awareness around what disability means and the diversity within disability. In the same way that women who talk about sexual abuse need to be believed. I can't tell you how many times I have to like prove to people about my disability outside of just having an actual series of things that make it challenging for me to participate in the workforce. There's so many things that in general our society is very driven by results and efficiency, and that's hard on people that are able-bodied. So I don't know why they put that extra pressure on somebody who is saying, I would like to do my job, but I need this to do it, or I need these things in place to do it, and it's not recognized. So I think that an awareness around what the actual needs are in correlation to the efficiencies that they want to see happen. It's not to say that they won't get their goals fulfilled. It's just that it has to be mindful. And I think they're trying to cut the diversity and inclusion conversation, but this is not about diversity and inclusion. This is about being able to perform a job and do it effectively. That's the other stuff is an aside, but to be able to feel empowered and feel like I can contribute to a workforce has everything to do with them giving me the tools to do so. And if that's what they're not interested in doing, there needs to be some type of governing body around that doesn't make the quote unquote victim who has the disability suffer even more than what they are already doing. Because, I don't know about anyone else, but I'm very hard on myself. And I finally have this analogy that I use that I'll share before I stop talking. But if I did not have my right arm, which is my dominant arm, and somebody kept asking me to do something, there needs to be a time that allows me, one, to try with my other hand, to give me permission to make mistakes, to give me the technology to maybe look at it so that I can use it more more effectively. I used to bang my head against the wall saying, why can't I use my right arm? Why can't I use my right arm? And then I have to gently remind myself, I don't have a right arm. So why am I trying to do something that I can't use? I don't have it. Um, and so again, I'm the accountability person for myself. Is I have to recognize what my strengths and my limitations and my skills and abilities are, and I need to be able to say I can do X, Y, and Z very effectively, and I can do A, B, C very effectively if I have these things in place. So it's really getting a chance to understand yourself, how your disability functions, how to thrive with the disability, even maybe the reframing of the disability to ability challenges, um, a whole bunch of things that it's the language, it's the mindfulness, it's the awareness, it's the humanity, it's the bottom line. It's a whole bunch of things that they are not considering, and it's taking us out of a certain aspect of the workforce that could actually be quite beneficial because the chances of us leaving our job when we find one that supports us is very little because we want to be able to contribute and make money just like everybody else. But if you don't make it available to us, then how are we supposed to do that? So maybe I had more questions than answers, but that's how I feel.
No, it is always good to leave some questions because that helps us reflect as the audience to say, you know what, it has that brainstorm light bulb. So thank you so much. And I gotta say that example with not having a right arm and trying to use something that you do not have. And I think a lot of individuals who live with a disability, we feel forced that we have to like use what we have, or we have to kind of hide that disability, or if we can't hide that disability, use other means that do not work for us. So, a really great analogy. Don't be surprised if I take that from you, LA.
It's
But thank
okay,
you
I'm
for
here to share.
wonderful. Sharing is caring. Wonderful. Okay, so we are rounding out our panel, and we have one last question, and then we're going to take some Q&A questions from people in the audience, done by Amanda. So even with the last question, so I'm going to sort of add a little bit to this question as well. So, what actions do you think we could take as a community, and how could we achieve this? And on top of that question, any last comments as well that you just want to leave behind with the audience members in this beautiful virtual space? So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with you, Hakeem.
Um, can you repeat the question?
Of course, of course. Okay, so what actions do you think we could take as a community, and how can we achieve this? And then on top of that, any comments or any last items you want to leave behind with the
Yeah,
audience?
I just want to correct that my name is Abdul. I've been transitioning from Hakeem to a different, but besides that, um, what actions can we take as a community? I think the first step that we must take as a community is to support each other. So provide, keep like uh having events like this is useful because people can know what resources are out there. How can we collaborate as a community to um, adapt? How can we advocate for resources? How we can provide people with the resources to be successful and get employment? Because majority of people with disabilities and mental illness actually want to contribute to society, actually want to work, not necessarily not only to support themselves financially, but also, that sense of pride, that sense of, accomplishment.
Okay, thank you, Abdul. LA Wade, I'm going to ask you the same question. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think I finally got it this time.
Perfect, thank you.
Um, I think that as a community, there needs to be a lot more culturally relevant awareness around Black and disability specifically. There's a lot of there's like this criminalization around disability that I'm trying to work through because it's getting on my nerves. Um, but also advocacy for equitable healthcare and education would be helpful. Um, Combating employment discrimination in some way with like a governing body or maybe ASHE. I don't know what the principles of the program or the organization does fully, but advocacy goes a long way. Um, we need to combat more so employment discrimination. Like when people get in trouble, so to speak, with a job, it would be really great to have a lawyer that can do some pro bono work for those who have a documented disability, so that we learn how to advocate for ourselves from a legal perspective. And then, of course, for ourselves, mental health and wellness, just having an understanding of it being something that we all are responsible for, um, to create those community-based solutions. And I think that we need to understand, I think with the last thing is that inclusion is not like they're not doing us a favor. Inclusion is not about, let me beg a favor from you and let me have my things in place so I can do my job properly. That's just ridiculous. We are just trying to do what we can do with the fact that we don't have an arm, and you're asking me to use something that I don't have. And so I think that would be the last things that I would say.
Well said, well said. And even just everybody here, well said. Such amazing, valuable advice and wisdom and experience. It was an incredible time being a part of this panel, and I feel very lucky that I got to moderate this and actually see everything or hear everything firsthand.